People have asked me, why do you want to run for mayor? Why would, some say, why would anybody want to run for mayor? There are tough issues out there that I want to tackle head on. Education, the quality of public education. We have families, like the individual I talked to a few days ago. His son, his first child, is 2 months old. And he's already thinking, as most parents do, about where his son is going to go to preschool. And he's already thinking about the quality of the school, the public school, near where he lives. We need to deal with the neighborhood schools. We've created, through Renaissance 2010, charter schools. We've created more magnet schools, selective enrollment schools, and they're academic options that should be available to parents. But we still have not gotten it right when it comes to dealing with many neighborhood schools that are underperforming and can be improved. And you don't have to close a building, close down a school to improve a school. You can do it without causing those kinds of disruptions. And I've seen that happen time and time again. There are a lot of issues related to resources. We all know that. I just, a couple weeks ago, went and supported the parents at Whittier School, the ones who have been in the field house. And I've been at this a long time. And those parents, through their action, were able to get a reporter to look at the numbers and report that there are over 100 Chicago public schools without a library. We didn't know that. I didn't know that. Without a library. And so the parents are fighting to create a library in the field house. How could we, in this day and age, have schools without libraries? If we don't have the resources in every school, then how can we expect children to thrive in those schools? And how can we expect to help parents help their children? And of course, I'm a big believer in early childhood education, and the more we do at that level with the child and the parents, I think the better off we are. And so here you have a school where the parents, and we're talking about the local school council, and I'm one of the creators of the local school councils in the state of Illinois. One of the first bills that I worked on in 1988, because I started serving in the Senate in 1987, was the school reform bill of 1988. And so I'm one of the creators of the local school councils. I believe in parental involvement, and I believe that the community should fully engage in helping to make the decisions about how their schools operate. And so it's through parents that we get after-school programs developed, that we make schools community centers that are open in the evenings and open on Saturdays for culture activities and adult education activities for the parents and tutoring for the children while the parents are involved in a GD class or an English as a second language class. The children are receiving tutoring. And then together the families are involved in cultural activities and social activities. Those are the kinds of schools that we need to see in every neighborhood. And some people say, well, we need to extend the school day. Well, that's how you extend the school day, by developing those kinds and offering those kinds of activities. And so we have examples of successful programs out there. While I was a state senator, I provided funding for a number of community organizations, like the Logan Square Neighborhood Association and a number of other community groups that have developed very successful programs. And test scores have improved in those areas. But one thing I learned over the years, and maybe it's because of my own organizing background, is if there's no organizing activities, if there aren't any demands being placed on the system does not respond. The system ignores you. The system forgets that you exist. My belief is that every child is intelligent, every child is capable of learning, regardless of what their economic circumstances are. No, it doesn't matter where they live. If given the opportunities, they can excel. And so there is this mismatch or a lack of matching at all that occurs in our city. And why aren't we focusing in on manufacturers? And why don't we use TIFs to support that type of activity rather than the downtown development to give to large corporations that are not in need of that assistance? And so we need a reworking of the TIF model. We have 159 of them. And we need to make that model work in areas that are actually in need of, in economically depressed areas, because that was the original intent. Other issues, of course, the budget and the deficit. We have a $650 million deficit. That has to be dealt with. My response right now is that we, of course, have to cut expenses. We have to find a way of cutting expenses. The question is where. We have to also shift existing dollars, and we have to look for additional ways. I am proposing that within the Inspector General's office, we increase the number of program auditors in that office. Do you know that there are only about 6 program auditors in the Inspector General's office for the entire city? A $6 billion plus budget, 6. And yet, when you look at stories like the recent story of the water department and the fact that people who had a meter, an individual who has a meter, has the meter number, and he calls in and he says, I haven't been getting a bill, and I have a meter, and here's the meter number, and they say, well, you're not in the system. That was the response. We need to conduct program audits, not to be punitive, not to do an I gotcha, but rather to identify deficiencies and waste, and then to develop corrective actions and remedial actions that then are used to improve the departments. That's simple. My opponents in the race, and I say opponents, I should say candidates in the race, will talk about forensic audits and that type of, that's a popular term now, use forensic. All it means is that you're going to carefully analyze the budget, and that you're going to look at every line and every expenditure, and you're going to analyze it. That's what they mean when they say forensic. Well, we should be doing that on an annual basis, and through the program audits, we can, even though we can't audit every department or every component of every department annually, we should set a schedule for these program audits and let the department heads know that we're not using these audits to hit you over the head and to deal with misconduct, but in the process you could identify potentials for misconduct and be able to address them through the remediation that needs to take place. Those are areas that I will be addressing, along with other areas. Of course, housing is an issue. Health care and access to affordable health care is an issue. The city has clinics, West Town Clinic, other clinics. How the clinics collaborate with county and the county's health system is a question. As a matter of fact, I talked with Quentin Young the other day and asked Quentin if he would bring together a group to begin to advise on that, because we're forming policy groups in all these areas, and we're engaging people. When I said that we want to engage the full city in this conversation, we're going to practice what we're preaching. We're going to have people work in different arenas and help us develop policy positions on this. As I mentioned earlier, in the manufacturing area, the education area, and all the other areas. We're going to be very, very democratic in the process.